So today I'm going to have a look at some tips for learning and memorising a performance piece when it seems like there's quite a lot of music to learn and it might be a little bit intimidating. What I've just played is the main melody part from the Top Gun film. It's an old film, I remember it from the original one. You might have seen the remake, well, the sequel to it, the Maverick film. This is just the melody part. I'm not going to look at the solo at this point. I might do that in a future video. The reason I've chosen to use this piece as an example is because there's quite a lot of repetition, and it's a great way for me to be able to demonstrate some of the tips that I'm going to give you on how to learn a lengthy piece of music that might at first seem like it's going to take you a long time. You can break it down and try and save a little bit of time and energy on learning it. So I'm going to include a link to the version of the tab that I'm going to share with you, the songs to tab. I've done that for a reason, because it's available, it's widely available. I'm not criticising the accuracy of this tab, but it's not 100% as it was originally played by the guitar player Steve Stevens, who wrote the piece. I've watched it, a few videos of him doing it. He does seem to do it differently each time I watch it, but I know for a fact the notes are quite accurate, but the actual fretting, positions, fingering isn't 100%. So if you watch the video and it doesn't make sense with the tab, that's why. But the tab's perfectly fine for learning the song, getting to grips with it. So I'll share a link to that. Any of the techniques that I mentioned that I've covered previously, I'll also share a link to those as always. So let's get into it. The first tip is have a good listen to the piece that you're trying to learn, so that you've got an idea in your head, audio wise, what it should sound like before you even pick up your guitar. It makes it a lot easier, because then you've got a reference point, you know what you're aiming for. Try and listen out for anything that's going to be tricky, might cause you a little bit of a challenge learning, and then you've got you can sort of see the path ahead before you pick your guitar up and start getting into it. So have an idea what the song sounds like, and also whilst you're learning it, make sure you've got the music there to listen to, so that you can actually practice along to it, or you can listen to hear what the pieces should sound like, rather than having to sight read the music, because tab doesn't give you the timing, remember, it just gives you the notes. So it's important to have the music ready. That's tip number one. Tip number two, rather than just jumping straight into it from bar one, it's always worth spending a little bit of time having a look through the piece that you're trying to learn, again, so that you can spot anything that might be complicated or might cause you problems. Be aware of that in advance. If you want to, maybe tackle those bits first, so that you know you'll be able to complete the entire piece, and then you've got a bigger overall picture of the piece that you're trying to learn. That's going to become really important here, because if you do that as an exercise, in fact you can do that as an exercise, what I would suggest maybe for your own development is pause my video now and have a look through the tab that I've shared with you, and you should notice one thing in particular. The thing in particular that you should notice is that there's a lot of repetition there, which is great, because it means that there's not as much to learn as what you might have thought there was. It's certainly the first half of the song, before we get into the solo, there's only basically 5 notes used. It modulates a little bit like when I went up the fretboard, but you're only using 5 notes it starts off in the C major scale. So there's not a lot of actual notage there that you need to learn. There is some variation on those notes. The more repeats it does, it tends to put a few more intricacies in, like harmonics, bends, vibrato, hammers and pulls. Those are some of the techniques that I'll put my links to my videos that I've covered. But don't worry too much about that to begin with. My tip would be, as this third tip, will be just to concentrate on learning the notes to begin with, and then you can add those in later. That works particularly well for this piece. So let's have another look again at what we're going to play. Now I said it's your basic your C major scale. Just 5 notes of your C major scale. That's not too important if you're not familiar with the theory, but just to show how simple it is. And it's played in an octave starting position, so and those are essentially the only 5 notes we're going to use for the first 44, 46 bars of this piece. So that makes it quite simple for us. The pattern that I played when I played the melody at the start of this video was just using those 5 notes, and as I say, after I've done the piece that I'd learned, I just played the same thing at a different position. So when I say learn the basic melody, don't worry about if there's the hammer-ons, pull-offs, whatever else. Just get the notes in your head first. Certainly for this piece, you'll see how it works when you put it together, and then you can add those things in later. So if I just want to learn those notes, the melody, I'll play through now, just assuming that I'm just going to pick those notes out so we can hear the notes. That's 50% of what we need to learn. Then we'll repeat it again, but the last two notes on the second time they repeat slightly different, it ends on a different note. That's all we need to do. So we're repeating the same thing, it's just that last note or two that's different on it. When I move up to a different position, I'm playing exactly the same pattern of notes, but rather than starting here at my 5th fret, I'm starting up here at my 11th fret. So I'm going from... We play that through a couple of times, and we move up. Play the same thing again. And that's all you need to know to get you through the basic melody of the song. Now, once you've memorised the notes, which shouldn't be too difficult, there's just 2 little patterns and we're playing them in 2 different positions. That's quite easy to memorise. That takes away a lot of the burden of what you need to learn. So once you've done that, you can then put your energy and your effort into including what I call the flavour, the embellishments of the piece, which might be the hammers, pulls, bends, whatever else you're doing. One thing that is used in the song is the whammy bar, the tremolo arm. You may or may not have that on your guitar, so don't worry if you haven't got that. There's a couple of pieces where a couple of parts where we'll do like maybe a little vibrato with the arm. I can replicate that with a bit of finger vibrato. That's not too much of a problem. I think there's a piece where there's a bit of a dive bomb. That's a little bit more difficult to replicate, but you could also do that with a slide. That's the best you've got if you haven't got a tremolo arm, but don't worry too much about that. Also the hammer-ons and pull-offs, it just gives a little bit more dynamics to the piece. When you pick every note sounds the same, so it sounds a little bit clunky and a bit electronic digital, as though there's not as much feeling into it. So when you have a look at the tab, you'll see some of the symbols where you might want to do the hammer-ons, pull-offs, and there's some harmonics in as well. The artificial pinched harmonics, which I've covered previously. So I've done a couple of pull-offs there instead of... And then on the next note I might play a harmonic. Hammer on. A little bit of bar vibrato. Pull-offs. Harmonic. Hammer on. And maybe do a bomb. All these things are on the tab when you need to put those little embellishments in. But rather than trying to memorise every note with those things on it to start with your first time through, because there's so few notes, just remember and learn those patterns, play them there, then play them there, and then you can put in the extra bits on it. Hope that helps. This isn't a particular lesson on learning this Top Gun piece. I may or may not do the full piece later. This is more focused on developing skills in memorising a performance piece, whether it be Top Gun or whether it be any other piece. The same rules apply. Listen to the music, make sure you've got it in your head so you know what it should sound like. Have a look through the music in advance, even before you pick your guitar up, so that you've got an idea of what's coming, anything that might catch you out, and look for any repeats, any patterns that are the same, because then you know you've just got to that halves your learning burden. You can learn it, and if it's repeated, you just have to play the same thing as again. so it becomes a little bit less intimidating. So it's quite a straightforward piece, apart from the solo that comes later, so most of you should be able to have a good go at this and enjoy it. Sounds cool. It's in a film that was released fairly recently, so it's something you can show to your friends. Have a good time learning it, good practice piece, and as ever, enjoy.